Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Jocelyn Freeman, and it'll actually be just me. I said to Aaron, hey, I got this inspiration for a topic. I want to just go record it. And once in a while, we enjoy doing that. This topic, which is why emotion comes before logic in conversations with your spouse, it came from a session that we just got off of. And I was like, I just got to hit record and start to talk about it because it's been a theme in several recent sessions. And you've probably heard us talk about that, how we just notice that within a few days, a lot of the couples will have similar things coming up for them. And so I thought, hey, podcast listeners will probably resonate with this as well. So that topic, that title, it probably hit home because I'm sure you're thinking, wait, one of us is trying to talk about a logical decision and the other one of us is trying to be understood emotionally and it's creating conflict. Well, you're not alone if that happens. And I'm going to talk about why. I'm going to talk about why emotion actually comes before logic and also what to do about it. But let me put some context out there. If you think about it, our romantic partner and the person that we choose to build a life with is unlike any other relationship. There might be some, similarities, some overlap in terms of you enjoy, companionship and fun with friends, just like you enjoy companionship and fun with your partner. So there's some overlap. But there are several aspects of a romantic partnership. And for a lot of us, like marriage is even an entirely different context for a relationship. And we need to put that into perspective that even those points that seem logical, like you're making a decision, it might even seem something that seems like it should be a neutral topic or it should be just based off of facts. The thing is, it often has underlying emotion tied to it in a romantic partnership. This applies even to financial decisions that you are making. It applies to, decision points that show up in parenting and with your children. It shows up even in decision points of going to see family members and travel, what to do on the weekend, right? All of these things, while many of them you could argue should just be data, right? Like finances, no, it's just data, it's just numbers. But there's emotion tied to it. Think about it. A romantic partner, the person you choose to build a life with, the person that you merge everything with, you have so much more invested in that relationship. In a sense, there's even a vulnerability in putting your heart on the line, your happiness on the line, your security on the line. There's vulnerability in that. There's a little bit of a leap of faith. Of course, not a blind leap of faith. I would hope not. We also have a lot at stake emotionally, right? In that romantic and life partnership, we are relying on so much more. Yes, you might have best friends. You might have people that you open up to, you a really, really close friend, a mentor, a therapist. But when we, again, have this person that we love most in the world and we are creating this great life with, we are not expecting, because I know that can feel like a really strong word, but it's like this commitment to provide each other security. That's both emotional, financial, etc., but it's also support. It's also, I want to feel the most seen and understood by this person. And I know that as you hear that, it can even make you realize the times that you don't feel that or the times that you don't provide that for your partner. And it's okay. We all have it. Aaron and I do this for a living. And there are times where we forget about this point that I'm going to go into about why emotion comes before logic. But what I'm trying to convey first with this context is that your relationship with your spouse is unlike any other relationship. And therefore, You can't just compare how things go in the work setting, because you might be like, well, when I work with a colleague and we're approaching a project, we just look at the points, the data, the facts. I don't know why I'm using that voice, but okay, that's a work relationship. Or, hey, well, how I am with my friends is this, 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 and this. Okay, well, that's your friends, your children, everyone else. It's a different relationship for the reasons I already mentioned. So, the thing is, all of these points that show up in your relationship, even when you misunderstand each other, or even when you have different perspectives, you see something differently, or there's a real decision you need to make, you need to remember that there are underlying feelings linked to these decisions, and the stakes are higher. Remember what I said. We are putting so much more on the line in this relationship with our spouse. Therefore, our emotions are even more prevalent in these conversations with our partner because so much more is on the line. So I hope that's clear. Now, I want to give a couple examples of this and how we can just so easily lose sight of this point that emotion comes before logic. So of course, I'll definitely maintain privacy, but there was a couple, and one of the things they noticed and they brought to us on the session was he had brought up a seemingly, simple decision to make. He had wanted a watch that was a little bit of an investment, and he wanted to do it for professional reasons because he goes to, important meetings. So he brings this decision point. I want to get this watch, and here's how much it is. He thought, hey, this is going to be pretty much a pretty quick conversation because it's like just a data, a number, and a quick decision to make. For her, a lot of emotion came up. Not that she was like suddenly crying. I don't mean that. I mean, she had emotions she needed to process related to the decision. And it was more complex than a yes or a no for her because it was like this spider web of being linked to other factors of what was going on with their family planning, with where their relationship has been at, with other decisions that they've made in the larger context of their relationship. And so it was bigger than that. And until they realized, oh, we need to address the emotion before this logic, it started to create friction in the conversation. It started to feel like, why are we feeling like almost like oil and water? Just I'm putting my words into that. Another couple, she brought to the table, hey, I want to just kind of reassess where we're at with our roles and responsibilities, chores, who does what. She was coming into the conversation ready to have just like a very simple kind of checklisty conversation of like this or that. Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And like the data. She was in a logic-based mindset around it. For him in that moment, there was emotion related to it. And again, they weren't at the moment realizing this clash of emotion-based conversation versus logic-based conversation. And they were starting to get a little bit derailed. Thankfully, they had a session with us scheduled for shortly after it. And so we were able to put that into context. And it was a light bulb moment for them. These little ahas can make such a difference. And so I share this with you to like imprint this in your memory of in this romantic partnership, in this person that I've chosen to build a life with, it isn't going to all be data, facts, and logic. And that if a topic gets brought up, we need to realize, are we having an emotion-based conversation right now, or are we both in a logical state of mind? And you'll know based on if, one of you is bringing up facts and data and logic and the other person's meeting you there with, just very simple, like yes or no, or fact-based replies. Okay, you're both in a logical state of mind. If one of you is starting to bring up feelings that maybe need to be addressed, maybe it's linked to the past, maybe it's linked to the present moment, we need to address the emotion first. Why? Not only for the reasons I already mentioned, but this is mentioned in a lot of places. This is not just my theory. This is psychological understanding that when it comes to closer, intimate relationships, we cannot have the same influence with our partner if they do not feel understood emotionally first. This is actually the case not just in romantic relationships, by the way. It's actually a well-known fact even in people who are in the sales industry. Until the person on the other side feels understood in terms of how they feel emotionally about the decision, no facts, no data, no information will convince them to buy. I know that's a totally different context. I'm just trying to tell you this is not just a romantic partner thing. This is a human being thing. We are emotional creatures, even with things that seem somewhat logical. Take a financial decision. You could still be talking about the numbers, the data, etc., and you still have feelings about that because it links to security. It links to trust. It links to your desire for freedom and fun. We are emotional creatures and we need to understand that and accept that. And it's again, even more like extreme, you could say, in a romantic relationship because of how much is on the line. So we talked about the influence. We need to understand each other emotionally first, because when we ignore that emotional side of our partner and ourselves, and we're trying to step over it, we're trying to just, come on, can't we just have this be like, can't we just get to the decision? Can't we just get to the data? Or like trying to force your perspective on them, you're going to create more resistance, actually. They're going to get more dysregulated. It's going to spiral. So we don't want to jump to solutions. We don't want to jump to trying to force facts down our partner's throat. It's going to make them feel more dismissed, more unheard. And it will also create more escalation because, again, when we feel dismissed, when we feel unheard by our partner, we're not going to, number one, be open and receptive to the logic that they're bringing up, but we're going to start to now feel like not quite enemies necessarily, but we're not on the same wavelength. And then that can spiral even more into feeling unloved because it's like, oh my gosh, this person that I love most and supposedly loves me most doesn't understand me. So you can see where this snowballs and like could take something that seems so productive to talk about or so important to talk about, but becomes more disconnecting. And it's not because you don't actually love each other. It's not because you don't actually want to understand each other. It's because you lose sight of this fact that emotion comes before logic in conversations with your spouse. So, what is the point here? Number one, remember that. Two, remember this, that the primary goal in your relationship with your spouse is to connect emotionally first. Think about even conversations where when you've been emotionally in sync with each other, even if you have differing experiences about the same topic, which is common, but when you feel understood by each other, you feel emotionally in sync. And there's just a pause. Maybe it's a second pause. Maybe it's a few minutes. Maybe it's a day. Maybe you just address the emotion first. You are so much more receptive to each other's suggestions, to the logical decisions that need to be made, because it's disarming, right? We feel safe. We feel like just gotten by our person. So therefore, of course, I'll be more open and receptive to you. And the opposite can be true, right? So emotional safety, this being so important, emotional connection and emotional safety. What creates emotional safety? Number one, closing your mouth and just listening. We don't need to jump in. We don't need to interrupt each other. We don't need to force facts down our partner's throat. Take a minute, just listen, just hear him out. Sometimes that's literally the solution, is just listening and maybe even ending the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. It doesn't need to all be solved in one conversation sometimes, you guys. So number one, just closing your mouth and listening. Second, stay curious. If needed, ask clarifying questions, but don't try to convince right away, right? Like you may be like, oh, well, there's a point you made that I could actually, supersede with some facts. Not going to go well. Ask a clarifying question. Maybe once it's all understood between both of you, then you could say, it's always good to ask a question, hey, you brought up a good point about ... Could I share something I learned about that? That question, it's not to be like mechanical. This isn't about being robotic. It's that when our partner's in an emotional state and we not only understand their experience because we listened and we ask that question first, it feels safe. It doesn't feel like you're trying to force something or defend something. You're checking in to see, am I in a space where I want to hear, yeah, what you learned, even if it is from a logical sense. So remember that. Let me ask if they're in a space where I could share something I learned about that or a perspective about that. Maybe there'll be a no, maybe there'll be a yes. It depends on the significance of the emotion that they're feeling to that topic. So, what have I said so far around emotional safety? Slowing down and listening. 2, staying curious, asking clarifying questions if needed. Get that permission before you correct something or offer something you learned or insight or perspective. See what position they're in. If they're not ready, that's okay. Come back to the logic later. You can always come back to the logic later. And then also make sure you're focused on the win-win outcome. Because look, here's the reality of things. Are there going to be situations in your relationship where after you talk, it becomes perfectly clear that one person has the right idea and you go with them? Maybe so. But a lot of these decision points, if you feel pretty differently, there's still a way to find a win-win. The reason you just haven't been able to do it is you're not taking that first step of understanding each other emotionally. What are our drivers here? What are our deeper motivations in this area? What are our fears? What are our triggers? Because if we understand that deeper perspective of each other, we will, number one, be more receptive to each other's ideas, but we'll find more of a win-win. We'll be in a collaborative state. That's what emotional safety does. You start to become collaborators rather than competitors or people in conflict. Do you see what I'm saying here? I feel hyped up about this because this could truly be a huge shift for you guys if you just think about this differently in how you engage. And here's the thing, I know we're a busy couple. It feels sometimes like we have 5 minutes to talk and we got to make a decision. And so we can sometimes be in too much of a get things done to do like perspective. And then we rush it and we rush past the most important part, being that emotional connection and being emotionally in sync. So don't lose sight of this, no matter how busy you are, no matter how rushed you feel you have to make decisions. Maybe it actually doesn't need to be made right this second. Some maybe. I hope there's not that many urgent decisions that have to take place. But even so, if let's say you have to make a decision about the watch, I'll go back to that watch story that I mentioned. Let's say there's a real reason, it's like an auction, and he has an hour to decide. Even if that's the case, if you took 10 minutes to just focus on the emotional connection and emotional understanding, the rest of the time could be addressing the logic. Or you know what? It could take 15 minutes total and you have 45-minute grace period. It doesn't take that long to address emotions. I think that's one of the fallacies that we all need to reframe, is that if you're actually doing these steps, it's not going to have to be a 3-hour conversation. Maybe some would be. I'm not saying that there's never. If there's some real deep underlying healing topics that you're having where you're like 10 years of things are coming up in your relationship, hey, that might happen once in a very while. But the majority of the time, it is not going to take that long for you guys to just connect emotionally first, validate each other first emotionally, make sure you understand each other's deepest drivers, needs, feelings, fears about it, and then you get clear on what's a win-win outcome for us. Let's think as collaborators, because remember, we're a team. We're building this life together. We want what is best for both of us. I really do hope that is your mindset. Now, here's the thing. There's so much more to say about this, and I know because we work with couples that there are very easy places that you can get derailed and off track and triggered and caught up in what we call the conflict cycle, and that's why you just must attend our upcoming live marriage web class when you're actually hearing this episode, it is actually the next day. So if you're hearing this episode, you need to immediately go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com. We only do this live and free online training once per year. So do not put this off because you don't have more time. Again, go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com. That's with an S. And it's also linked in the show notes. We are going into very specific communication and conflict tools and frameworks. The visuals, I cannot tell you how helpful they are. Visuals help us remember. Visuals help us really link together principles that maybe we've heard or we've thought of or we've read, but it's hard to put it all into context. We're going to put it all into context. And so it's just a must. Couples really love the way we put things into frameworks and things that are practical and implementable. So make sure you do that. It's just topics and principles that we're very passionate about. So we're excited to see you all on that marriage web class. Make sure you go there. Please don't lose sight of this topic. And if this resonated, please send us a message if this episode was helpful. I just really wanted to bring it up because it was coming up in so many sessions. And if you also find value from our podcast, please go ahead and hit that 5 stars on whichever platform that you're listening on. That really helps us. And maybe write a 1-sentence review and share with your friends. That really, really helps us. But we will see you at the marriage web class, and make sure you dive into all of our resources, and we will talk to you guys next time.